You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now, it's our turn.
Okay, well, you're listening to Tony Farrell. I'm the former principal intelligence analyst at the infamous South Yorkshire Police. I was chucked out of that service in July 2010. Some people will know that from the Truth Movement because I'm in a high-profile employment appeal tribunal case, which is still ongoing. And I was interested in the Hillsborough disaster and the behaviour over the last 23 years of my former police force. So they're issues I would like to raise today in the light of the recent release of findings from the Bishop of Liverpool and the independent inquiry. But first, I think I'll just give listeners an update on the progress with my particular stance regarding getting the sack from South Yorkshire Police. Would that be appropriate?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Well, people may recall that when I made a stance in July 2010 as the principal intelligence analyst of South Yorkshire Police, one of the assignments that we had to do at that time was a threat assessment matrix, which was a reduced number crunching exercise to turn the threat that faced South Yorkshire Police and the community of South Yorkshire into some kind of numerical probability model, a simulation model. And we've covered a multitude of sins here, ranging from just low-level antisocial behaviour in the neighbourhoods in Sheffield, Barnsley, Rotherham and Doncaster, compared to the threat from terrorism. And it was in that last domain, terrorism and counter-terrorism, which I encountered severe difficulties in the lead-up to the assignment, which I had to present before a board, including the Chief Constable. Now, why did I suddenly clash with my employers at the time, having had 17 years of exemplary service? Well, I woke up basically in the week before the assignment was due, and woke up to the fact that 9/11 and the London bombings of July the 7th, 2005 were not as the government narratives would have us believe. The stories didn't hold up. When I realised that through my own research on the internet, looking at first 9/11 and having a browse through the 9/11 commitment and contrasting against, the films that were there, the Loose Change and 9/11 Ripple Effect and all the other documentaries that were pulling holes up into the 9/11 truth. I had a crisis of conscience, and I actually went to a minister because I knew in a few days' time I would have to say that the threat was coming from Islamic terrorism, and the assumption that 19 suicidal maniacs hijacked the aircrafts and crashed them into the Pentagon and the Twin Towers, and one was felled in Pennsylvania, and simply didn't really add up any longer. But at that point in time, a few days before, I wasn't alert to the possibility that 772 was an inside job. In seeking some prayer, really, and some counsel from the minister, telling him about 9/11, and almost saying to him, I feel so outraged by 9/11 that I'm almost tempted to send the details I've uncovered on the internet to every single principal intelligence analyst in the United Kingdom. If it had done that, it would have been an instant sackable offence, I dare say, but so outraged I was almost tempted to do that. But he shocked me to the core by saying, well, have you thought about the London bombings? Was that false flag too? And I hadn't even considered that possibility, so no doubt, doubtless when I got home I was going to do that, hoping for some reassurance. That reassurance never came. I looked into it and I was horrified by what I saw when it was in plain sight, basically, that 772 was an inside job. And at that time there were very good documentaries available, Ludicrous Diversion, 77 Big Lie, Seeds of Deconstruction, and the 7/7 ripple effect by Moad Dib, who I believe you had on your show not so long ago.
Yeah.
Now, these documentaries offered compelling evidence, which, when you compared and contrasted with the inept, inaccurate official account of the London bombings, which was anonymous by some person in the Home Office, it really told you that 7/7 had all the hallmarks of an inside job rather than perpetrated by 4 Islamic suicidal maniacs, as the government would have us believe. Now, this brought into question the whole integrity of saying that the threat comes from Islamic terrorism. So I flagged that up in front of my management 2 days before the assignment was due on the 6th of July 2010. And they wrapped me up in cotton socks, tried to send me to occupational health for a mental health check, and tried the level best to persuade me to go to the board of directors on the 8th of July and keep on saying that the threat was from Islamic terrorism, in full knowledge that they weren't able to offer me any proofs whatsoever that that was the case. So they didn't dispute that it was right here. They just simply said, look, you and I are the government foot soldiers. You and I will never get the government to tell you the truth on this. So this was half admittance that basically, the government were lying and it was an inside job. But nevertheless, in spite of that, because we're just the government foot soldiers, I have to go along with it. But conscience would not permit me to do that. And on the 7th of July 2010, I came to my senses and resolved that day, on the 5th anniversary of the London bombings, to make my stance. This was my moment, really, where I was about to commit professional career suicide the next day. And I knew that I had to do this. So in the morning, I got in extra early and presented a ludicrous-looking strategic threat assessment matrix, scored up with daft scoring that reflected the ludicrous position that the management were putting me in. That led very quickly to my dismissal. The dismissal was a solemn affair. They were very complimentary to my 17 years of service, exemplary record. The views may be even correct, and have done some excellent work for South Yorkshire Police, but sadly it's an incompatible belief. The position is therefore untenable, so it is with regret that they sacked me. Now, what happened then was interesting. I went to the police authority to appeal. The police authority is different from the chief constable. It's the local politicians and the elected members. In front of that panel, they took a slightly different view than South Yorkshire Police. They didn't say that my beliefs could be correct. They took the view that anybody who holds the belief that 9/11 was an inside job could not work for the authority. So they said my views were outlandish and just rubber stamped the decision that had been made by South Yorkshire Police to sack me. Now that led to an employment tribunal in Sheffield, and ultimately that was fought out a year later in September 2011. By the time I got to the unfair hearing, I'd wasted around about £40,000 of legal fees, and my legal team came off at the last minute because I wouldn't go down the route that they were actually asking me to go down. And in the end, I had a layperson representing me, which was a guy called Ian Crane. People in the truth movement may be familiar with Ian Crane. He's a geopolitical analyst of some note, having previously worked as a human resource director in the oil industry. He rescued, he along with a guy called Dr. Rory Ridley Duff on the eve of my hearing, plotted to a different line of attack, dismissed all previous legal advice that I'd had, and simply argued as best they could, without knowing the law, that nowhere had South Yorkshire Police ever investigated my allegations that I was making, that 7/7, 9/11 and the terror threat was bogus. Now, the judge dismissed that at the employment tribunal, and I was left with an option to appeal, duly appealed. The appeal process was rejected, but we, under the particular rule, we argued for a new point, which was under the Public Interest Disclosure Act. And now this is in the Royal Court of Justice. Now, what I'm hoping for is, because I wasn't legally represented at the unfair dismissal hearing, right, then we were raising a new point, and the new point was the Public Interest Disclosure Act. which is a protected disclosure. If I was making allegations, basically as a whistleblower, the whistleblower in this context was the very fact that I was saying that the threat assessment matrix that they were asking me to produce was nothing more than a complete and utter sham to divert resources, police resources, into areas that are largely unaccountable in special branch, based on a monstrous lie and based on the fact that we were now demonising Muslims in terms of they were the enemy. They were the enemy that justified the war on terror and justified what I believe is an insipid and an illegal foreign policy agenda that we have held for the last decade, ever since 9/11, in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and in more recent times in the likes of Syria. This has led to a final appeal, which if I win on the basis of they will accept the new point of appeal at this late stage, then the best I can hope for is to go all the way back to the beginning in a Sheffield Employment Tribunal, but instead of fighting it out under the Employment Religious and Belief Regulations, which was the legislation I originally fought upon and lost, I would now fight it on the Public Interest Disclosure Act, which basically is saying that I had a duty of care to tell the truth to the public of South Yorkshire Police. It is in line with professional standards for honesty and integrity. And if I was making such allegations, South Yorkshire Police acted illegally in actually sacking me. They should have investigated. The nice thing about that is that South Yorkshire Police, throughout the Employment Tribunal, in order to defeat me on the Employment Religious and Belief Regulations, have gone on record time and time again saying that at no stage in this process have we ever investigated the veracity of Tony Farrell's analysis, and the analysis that on several occasions I offered them to produce a comprehensive strategic assessment to justify all the inferences I was making by saying that 7/7 and 9/11 had all the hallmarks of inside jobs, and that the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were immoral. I also was saying that the real threat that was coming to people in the United Kingdom, including South Yorkshire community, was the threat from internal tyranny, which was underpinned by secret societies and a satanic ideology. It was that satanic ideology, the mention of that when I was asked to explain myself, that initially led me down the route of an Employment Religious and Belief Regulations, because my own legal team at first said that's potentially a philosophical religious belief if you believe in a satanic ideology, that there is a satanic ideology. But basically, I lost the process in the Employment Tribunal because the judge, in one way, quite rightly, came to the view that I didn't hold, whilst I held religious beliefs, whilst I held philosophical beliefs, undoubtedly, the main stumbling block for me that prevented me from doing the assessment in a conventional format that would be acceptable to my employers was simply the fact that I'd weighed up all the evidence on 9/11 and 7/7 through observation and concluded that it pointed to one direction rather than another. It pointed towards an inside job rather than Islamic terrorists that had committed these 23 suicidal maniacs. So that was the gist of the case. Now, it's an interesting stage because I do think I've got a very good chance of going all the way back to remission in Sheffield. And if that's the case, all the analysis that I've put in front of the Employment Appeal Tribunal in Sheffield, in London rather, is on show. And I only have reasonable cause to suspect. So I think I'm one decision away from having the establishment on the ropes with regard to the 7/7. Now, that could be quite embarrassing for them.